Are you a fish? I'm not, I'm a squid. And my most popular and most controversial video, which I both love and regret, is about a book describing how the everyday notion of fish isn't evolutionarily consistent. But apparently lots of biologists say humans are, in fact, fish. Humans evolved from fish, therefore humans are fish. To me, that sounds like semantics. The correct name for something isn't measurable or testable in experiments. Unless maybe you're a Pokemon, I guess.
Pikachu! 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 Pikachu!
That said, you might be more fishy than you realize. Just ask Professor of Anatomy Neil Shubin, author of Your Inner Fish.
Or would you rather be a fish?
There's plenty of evidence that what we call humans have a common ancestor hundreds of millions of years ago, which we call a fish. Neil himself here found the fossils of a fishy, the Tiktaalik, which represents a new link between fishies and humans. It's probably not literally your great-great-great etc. grandpa, but it seems to be pretty close. Neil points out, if you go to a random graveyard on Earth, you probably won't find one of your ancestors, but you'll be in the right genetic ballpark, so at least humans can call Tiktaalik a distant relative. What can we learn about ourselves from our fishy brother from a fishy mother? Well, says Neil, fish do not have necks, but early land-living animals do have necks. Fishies have scales all over their bodies. Land-living animals do not. And importantly, fish have fins, whereas land-living animals have limbs with fingers, toes, wrists, and ankles. We can continue these comparisons and make a very long list of the ways that fish differ from land-living animals. Tiktaalik did have scales, but its head is completely free from the shoulder, just like the necks of amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, including humans. The entire shift can be traced to the loss of a few small bones in a fish like Tiktaalik. And when we look inside the fin, we see bones that correspond to the upper arm, the forearm, even parts of the wrist. The joints are there too. This is a fish with shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints, all inside a fin with webbing. Neil says these hand-like limbs look primitive, but hey, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was the human body. Meanwhile, by which I mean 200 years ago, anatomists in Germany found a normal fish with fins and scales, but behind its throat were large vascular sacs, lungs. What else can we find somewhere between humans and fish? Well, why stop at fish? We can go all the way back. Eyes rarely make it into the fossil record, even though they're found in virtually everything else on the planet, because they're important for capturing light in a way that it can be carried to the brain. How do eyes work? There's a protein known as an opsin, which initiates a chain reaction that leads to a neuron sending an impulse to our brain to see in black and white and in color. Insects, humans, clams, and scallops all have opsis. Where did this twisty path start? Opsin is identical to parts of certain molecules in bacteria. So in a sense, modified bits of ancient bacteria lie inside our retinas, helping us to see. Humans and fish share parts from way, way back. How do we hear? Sound waves enter the ear and make the eardrum rattle. The eardrum is attached to 3 little bones which shake along with it, swishing gel which bends nerves. Ears might seem like an unlikely place for a human-shark connection, especially since sharks don't have ears. But the connection is there. There is a tiny bone deep inside a human's ear, which, in our aquatic cousins, is a long rod that connects the upper jaw to the brain case. What's more, the major genes that control human eye and ear correspond to a single gene in more primitive creatures such as jellyfish. That's why some human birth defects affect both the eyes and the inner ear. How about noses? Humanity's closest fish relatives have an arrangement somewhat like a human's. The water enters a nostril and ultimately goes to a cavity linked with the mouth. Humans just traded smelling genes, which picked up scents in the water, for more smelling genes specializing in air. Oddly enough, the most primitive fish alive on the planet today, the jawless fish known as lampreys and hagfish, have neither air nor water genes. Rather, their receptors combine both types, because the earliest smelling genes were less specialized than modern smelling genes. However, humans are part of a lineage that has traded smell for sight. A human's hundreds of useless olfactory genes are left over from mammal ancestors who relied more heavily on the sense of smell to survive. We've got lots of information on teeth, because, like bones, teeth store well in the fossil record. So which came first, bones or teeth? Well, let's go back to the ancient jawless fish. They have no hard bones. These were soft bodies animals with hard teeth. Hard bones arose not to protect animals, but to eat them. Then, ostracoderms are among the earliest creatures with bony heads. Pop it under the microscope and you'll find virtually the same pattern as in human teeth. I think the most interesting connection in the book is hiccups. When you look at amphibians like tadpoles, which have gills and lungs, you can see a step between water breathers and air breathers. The brainstem originally controlled breathing in fish. It has to be jury-rigged to work in mammals. Tadpoles, representing stuff in between, want to pump water into their mouth and throat and across the gills, but they do not want the water to enter their lungs. To prevent it from doing so, they close the glottis, the flap that closes off the breathing tube. This is so similar to hiccups that many have proposed the two phenomena are one and the same. That's why humans can stop hiccups by holding their breath or breathing in a bag, inhaling lots of carbon dioxide. Now, Neil says fish do not have necks, but then shows us a fish with a neck. He says fish have fins instead of arms and fingers, but then shows us a fish with parts of the wrist. He says fish have scales all over their bodies, land-living mammals do not, and he doesn't discuss when human ancestors gave up scales, but obviously they did somewhere along the line. So where do fish end and humans begin? Or is there even a division? I actually sent an email asking about the matter to Professor Rick Winterbottom, the raving claddist featured in the book Why Fish Don't Exist. He was actually kind enough to reply quite quickly. Each person can define anything any way they want to. It then becomes a popularity contest as to which gets the most followers, with fishies as the word is used colloquially. That does not include the tetrapods, which includes man. But if I adhere to an evolutionary point of view and include ancestors and all descendants, then man is both a tetrapod and then a fish. And you can keep going on down the line to include Amphioxus, acorn worms, blah blah blah. I also asked Professor Neil Shubin. If you go by genealogy, then humans are fish. He also says genealogy makes him a Shubin, which I think implies that what we call stuff isn't a science itself. It's a culture around science. I mean, what's the scientific test? How do you measure Shubinness? Carl Sagan might say, we're all just made of star stuff, right?
The very matter that makes us up was generated long ago and far away in red giant stars. Our ancestors worshipped the sun, and they were far from foolish. It makes good sense to revere the sun and the stars,
because we are their children.
When I very briefly studied in India with National Geographic, we learned about a problem in some schools, a problem which I'm sure every country has somewhere. Students were tested on memorizing science until they could recite the textbook front to back. But they didn't actually understand what they had memorized. You can't move science forward like that. Static recitation, now that is science in quotes. There's a fun story in mathematics. A teacher says every triangle has 180 interior degrees and at most one right angle. The next day, a student comes in with a baseball featuring a triangle with 3 right angles for a total of 270 interior degrees. The teacher laughs it off and says, well, it's not really a triangle, but non-Euclidean geometry reinvents a lot of ideas. Is it a triangle? I'm not going to answer yes or no. I'm just going to reject the question completely. Moo! So, as I usually do here at Thinkster, here's a lesson from Buddhism. This time presented by Bruce Lee, Kung Fu film master, star of the movie Enter the Dragon.
It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
Remember, scientists use words to describe investigations into reality. But if you're not careful, you might think words are reality instead of just representing reality. The finger points at the moon, but it's not the moon. 2 fingers can point at the same moon. So if 2 groups of people mistake different fingers for the moon, they might wage war over different folie à deux. Incompatible shared psychoses.
It's raining. No, it's wiggling. No, it's raining. My mom told me it was wiggling, not raining. My mom said it is raining. And you're not real. I'm real. And that's raining. Ow! It is raining. Little Clay, it's raining. You poked my heart. You poked my heart.
Find your inner fish. Bye-bye. By the way, I've got a Patreon at patreon.com/thinkster. I want to thank all these squidlings and elder squids. Thanks.